The Andy Pollin Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, thinking they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
Oh, we are going to spend some time today on Turnaround Ted, as yesterday Ted Leonsis held a news conference with Washington Mayor Muriel Bowser to announce that they have a deal and Ted is staying. All the drama about Potomac Yard is over with, and Ted says this will be the last lease of his life. It is a lease that will take them through 2050. It's possible Ted lives that long. Will he start rattling the cage to get out? Excuse me. Before that, who knows? I mean, look, he's like the guy who had an affair. The affair ended, came home to his wife. Does he get celebrated for reuniting with his wife? Or do we say, well, Ted, you had wandering eyes there? You know, I mean, what is your motivation here? I know your motivation is to create this monster company that's going to go public and make even more money, and Monumental Sports that does so much. But, you know, you danced with Glenn Youngkin. And you boldly proclaimed that this was going to be good for everybody, that not only was this going to be great for Northern Virginia, but it was going to be fine for the District of Columbia because you were going to have the Mystics play there, and you were going to have some concerts there, and you were going to employ a whole bunch of people in Washington and a whole bunch of people in Virginia. But you took away two teams if you made this move. And he went to great lengths to say, well, you know, National Airport, that's Washington's airport, but it's actually in Virginia. And if I stand up on a rooftop, I can actually see D.C. from Virginia. So it's all going to be fine. Everybody's going to benefit from this. And then thanks to Louise Lucas and her big move in the Senate, Ted comes back to D.C. with his tail between his legs. And some said, well, he got $515 million. Well, he's ready to walk away from $500 million. He got another $15 million for what? Not a very good PR hit as far as I'm concerned. You know, he was booed when they celebrated T.J. Oshie's 1,000th game a week ago or so. You know, he's a guy, and I think Candace Buckner captured this pretty well. She wrote a column about this today. And by the way, if you did not read it a few weeks ago, when she wrote about the obnoxious spots that were running before Wizards and Capitals games about how great this was going to be and stuff with his son and the CEO of the company and how wonderful it was going to be for Virginia and for everybody, read that, because I think that really captured how things were unfolding at that point. And then he hit the roadblock in the Senate, and now he's back. She writes, will he be remembered as the steadfast owner and applauded for remaining in the city, or will he forever be demonized as the suburban-minded CEO who tried to scheme and plot his way out of town? Now, I don't think this is forgotten, you know, and I don't think we celebrate Ted as a hero for making a deal with the district. And for most of his tenure, remember, he came in about the same time as Dan Snyder. If I'm not mistaken, he bought the team shortly after they had made it to the Stanley Cup Finals in 1998. And then Dan Snyder became the owner of the then Redskins in May of 99. So they came on about a year apart, a little less than a year apart. And Ted has benefited over the years by being not Dan Snyder, really. I mean, you know, the bar was so low set by Snyder that just by being a human being, Ted could be celebrated. And, you know, to his credit, he delivered a Stanley Cup championship team in 2018. He did some good things. You know, signing Alex Ovechkin to that long-term contract when it seemed kind of nuts at the time, that has worked out great. The team has stayed competitive throughout Ovi's run with the Caps, and winning the Cup was a great thing. You know, there are cities that go much longer than Washington did without winning a Stanley Cup, so that was great. And you know, he has done some things to make improvements to the arena. He's very proud of his esports. I don't think that's as big a deal to others as it seems to be to him. But it's not all bad. And the fact that he's been accessible, that he's done interviews, that has made him better than Snyder, who ran a franchise into the ground. He took something that was unbreakable and he broke it. Ted hasn't done that. And Ted has done some things that, indicate that he really doesn't quite get it on a number of levels, like giving Bradley Beal that contract, which made him the only player in the league. Not LeBron, not Steph. None of these guys had no trade clauses in their contract. Bradley Beal did, and Ted called it a partnership. Like, Bradley and I are in for the long haul, so all the free agents are going to come running to us. No, didn't happen. And finally had to tear down the whole thing, and they're, going through a disaster of a season now with 14 wins with, I guess, like 9 games to go. Maybe they'll get number 15 tomorrow night when Detroit comes in. That's the only team in the league that's worse. But he has definitely benefited by not being Snyder. And now, is he celebrated for making this deal, or is he demonized forever, as she says, the suburban-minded CEO who tried to scheme and plot his way out of town? I think that's a reasonable question to be asked. And 10 years from now, maybe the arena looks state-of-the-art. It's great. The teams are winning. Everybody feels good. Or, does he start making some noise like, we signed this deal with the district, but it's not working out, and they promised we'd get more police presence down there, and there's still a lot of crime. And, could he even go to the extent of threatening to move the teams to another city? I don't think that would happen, but, that's got to be in play as well, because we've seen him. We've seen him stray, and just because he's come home and reconciled with the mayor doesn't mean that down the road there aren't going to be some issues with this. But it was all smiles and cheering and all good times last night. They had a news conference that started, I guess, about 6:30 or so, maybe 6:15, wrapped up before the Wizards took on Brooklyn last night. In fact, the mayor had to say, I think we got a game that's coming up here. But Ted was all positive, this is the best thing. This is how it should have worked out, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and said this, among other things.
This was not only the right thing for the community, the right thing for the city, the right thing for us. It's a really smart business deal. And Phil made the comment, which I said, I never thought you could say this, but you need to make T-shirts that say, it's easier and better to do business in Washington, D.C. than it is to do in Virginia. So I hope this is the start of a business staying here. I volunteered with the mayor to let's go recruit companies to come back. I think that we can be used as we're a thoughtful, important company. We're the largest sports and entertainment company in the area, including all the NFL teams. We have the most employees, we have the most revenues, we have the cleanest balance sheets. We're a really, really good business. And we are choosing to stay here and partner with the city. And now I want to move that part of our development out of the way after I sign this, because the business we're in is crafting and creating great experiences, great memories, and winning teams.
Yeah, so it's, and winning teams is a long way off, apparently, for the Wizards, or maybe not with the right drafting, but they will be in the lottery, and they will have an opportunity to get one of the top 3 picks. But last night they lost again after this cheery news conference. Now, I had to laugh at this. Zach Leonsis, Ted's kid, who's in the company. I don't know exactly what his role is. I know he's been in charge of broadcasting, and he's totally botched that. He got rid of Buck and Chenier, and not that Chris Miller doesn't do a decent job doing the games. Drew Gooden seems to be on occasionally as an analyst. Glenn Consor does some games. They have it seems like they have a rotating group of analysts on it. They to me anyway, they've lost the good feel that you'd have when you turn on a Wizards game and you had 2 familiar voices who had done the games forever. And Phil Chenier has his jersey up in the rafters at Capital One Arena, still does a really good job analyzing games, I think. Buckhant's still an excellent play-by-play guy, but he botched that, and ratings dropped dramatically, even when the team was half decent. You can understand why nobody's watching the games this year because they stink. But, yeah, that's part of what Zach does. And also now he's arm in arm with Dad in whatever they do. Now, I had to laugh at this tweet that he sent out last night after the announcement that the teams were staying. He wrote, "The moment you've been waiting for. We're staying at Capital One Arena, and it's going to be bigger and better than ever before. Grateful, humbled, and excited. DC made it happen. The right outcome for all." Well, just a few weeks ago, this, according to Zach, really wasn't the right outcome. The right outcome, according to Zach, in these propaganda spots that they ran before Wizards and Capitals games on Monumental, he was all in on Virginia and how great this was going to be for everybody.
I know that there are always going to be concerns around public funding of arenas. We wouldn't expect the state of Virginia to be giving us a handout, and they're not. I think we've found a really, really happy partnership in the Commonwealth of Virginia, the City of Alexandria, JBG Smith. We are really paying for this entire facility, and the state of Virginia is helping us to do that financing up front.
And there were, according to the agreement, now it's a handshake agreement, and Ted was careful to say, because he was able to continue to negotiate with Mayor Bowser while all this mishigas was going on, he said, no, we did not have a signed deal. But the $2 billion, don't fool us, Zach. That was part of the deal. $2 billion and a lot of land. One thing Ted said last night, and we'll get to more of that coming up in the next hour, was that there was a mall that's connected to Capital One Arena. And that mall was vacated while they were talking, while he was talking to Bowser about making this deal. And now they are going to be able to take over that space. I think it's another 1,200 square feet or something like that. And that's where they hope to build a practice facility. I guess, the idea of using what the Mystics use to play their games in Southeast is not an acceptable practice facility for the team. So they want something that would be connected to the arena. And that would be called, I guess it's been called Gallery Place Mall. So that would now be Wizards Capital space, and they could get that done. So we move forward, and, eventually the bruised feelings, I guess, will be forgotten to some degree. But Ted looks bad in this. He does. He looks not good, and he can't hide in the shadow of Dan Snyder anymore because Snyder's gone, and the honeymoon continues for the Josh Harris group with the Commanders. And as they continue to make improvements, and they're supposed to dump $75 million into improving what was FedEx Field and now is Commanders Field, they're supposed to upgrade the facilities, which the players rated as an F or F minus, as Harris put it, get better facilities and maybe attract different players to come and play for the team in free agency and so forth and so on. But what a trip it's been. And this announcement that took place at Potomac Yard, that was December the 12th. So, do the math. We've been at this for what, almost 4 months, more than 4 months. And there were times I thought, forget it, they're leaving. And, I just wondered how I'd feel watching the games over the next few years as they were due to start playing in Virginia in 2027. But that's not going to happen. The team is going to stick around. Opening day today. The Nationals get started in Cincinnati. I kvetched a little bit about that yesterday. I'm not thrilled with Washington opening the season on the road. I think D.C. should always open the baseball season, and there were times over the years that the President of the United States would throw out the first ball, and it's just, not the same opening on the road. Cincinnati should have a home opener on opening day, but they shouldn't be playing the Nationals. Cincinnati, the first professional team, they should have it, and Washington should have it, and that should be it. But, the way they do it now is they kind of roll out the season. And last week we had that series between the Dodgers and the Padres, which officially started the season, and now we're restarting the season with most of the teams opening, though the rain is playing a factor on the East Coast. Both the Mets and the Phillies postponed their openers until tomorrow because of the rain, but hopefully the Orioles get theirs in. That'll be a 3 o'clock start today at Camden Yards. First time that they have had opening day at Camden Yards since 2018, and there's a lot of excitement about the team. If you've not heard my interview with Mike Elias, the general manager, he was on with us yesterday. We reposted that on Twitter. And he's excellent. I mean, he's done a remarkable job. David Rubenstein was officially approved as the owner of the Orioles yesterday. And I think the most important thing, particularly for Washington fans, is what he said about the Masson deal. And as you know, that's been a big problem ever since the Nationals came here in 2005 for Montreal, the big battle over the money. They made the deal with the late Peter Angelos that the Orioles would control the TV rights for both teams and share the revenue, but the revenue sharing hasn't gone very well, and the Nationals have had to go to court to collect the money. So we'll see how this all plays out, but Rubenstein said that he does plan to involve himself in finding a resolution to the headache of the Masson dispute. This is from the Post, though he would not offer specifics about what a resolution might look like for the regional sports network that also broadcasts the Nationals games. He made it clear that he hopes to do so with Lerner and the Angelos families and get something, or hopes to do so with Lerner because they couldn't get things done with the Angelos family. And this quote, "I think all of baseball and all of the fans of Baltimore and Washington would like to see this resolved in a friendly, amicable way in the near future, and that's my goal." Now, there was a period of time when it looked like Ted might buy the Nationals, and it's pretty clear now that Lerner's not selling. So if Ted was going to buy the Nationals, that's what I thought might be the solution, that they would put the Orioles games on Ted's Monumental network because they have two channels, and then you'd have both the Nationals and the Orioles. But I guess they're going to keep Masson going, but in this day and age with all the cord cutting, it's not a winner anymore. That's a loser. And we'll see how things evolve. But I would not be surprised if there is some other network or some cooperation. The Ted thing seems to make the most sense, with the two channels. They might have a couple of conflicts with, playoff games with the Caps and the Wizards once they get there again, with early season games for the Orioles and the Nats. But I think that's something that might make the most sense because I don't think the Monumental's going anywhere. They're trying to turn that into a full streaming service anyway. And the Masson thing just really hasn't worked well at all, except for games. I mean, the other programming, and I've done some freelance work there over the years. They were very nice and they paid well, but it just has never really established itself as a network. It's more just a place to put the games, and they've had a lot of cutbacks with that in the pre and the post game programming. So hopefully, with some smart heads putting their heads together, with now Rubenstein owning the Orioles, that'll get resolved. All right, coming up in the next hour, more react to Ted sticking around D.C., not yanking the teams out to Virginia, and also we'll hear from Pro Day for Jayden Daniels as he talked to Louis Riddick about what people are asking him. Stay with us. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630. We will play more of what Ted Leonsis and D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser had to say at the news conference yesterday, announcing the deal, the partnership for Ted to keep the Caps and the Wizards in D.C. until at least 2050. And certainly there's hope beyond that. But at least for now, the storm has passed. They're not moving to Northern Virginia. And Potomac Yard, I just laugh because I think of the days of Jack Kent Cooke parading around with then Virginia Governor Douglas Wilder and proclaiming that this was going to be the greatest thing in the world. Never happened. They wound up in Landover, which he tried to name Raljon. And I've been there ever since. It's a dump. They're going to spend $75 billion to at least make it inhabitable for fans over the next 4 or 5 years, depending on how long they're going to be there until they can get a new stadium built. And another part of this, too, is what does this mean for the future of the Commanders? Because if Ted was able to get those teams to Virginia, it would seem that Josh Harris would have all the leverage in the world, right? DC's got to have a team. They have a baseball team, but you can't have Maryland having the Commanders or Virginia having 3 teams, which could have, I don't think they would have ever made a deal with Virginia, but that would have been a possibility. And now, D.C. might be saying, we'd like to have the Commanders, but we've just spent $515 million to keep the Caps and the Wizards in place, and we don't know what kind of financing we can come up with. I think, and if you heard this the other day, in fact, I should play this because I think this is important to the conversation. Roger Goodell was asked by J.P. Finley of Channel 4 here at the owners' meetings about RFK Stadium and the bill that has passed with the city council and the D.C. government that would allow the lease to be changed. They would extend the lease. It's on federal land. RFK be extended 99 years, and that there could be rezoning so that you could have commercial property around the stadium, which is crucial to getting it built there. And this was the exchange the other day between Finley and Goodell at his news conference.
How do you and the league view the growing congressional momentum towards RFK Stadium getting back into the city's hands and maybe getting a new stadium built there?
Well, I've talked to the mayor several times going back, I think, 2 years about allowing D.C. to have the ability to have a long-term lease. As you know, I grew up in Washington, D.C. I spent a lot of time at the old RFK Stadium. It's something that I think Josh and the Commanders want to evaluate. I think the city wants to evaluate, and I think the NFL does. So I see it as a very positive development that we can have another alternative that will allow us to get the kind of stadium in our nation's capital that is warranted, in my view.
So, league wants it. They want it in D.C. They don't want it to stay in Maryland, and off what happened with Ted, I don't think there's much chance they can get a deal done in Virginia. Just that's where deals go to die. It's just not going to happen there. Yesterday was the pro day for Jayden Daniels in Baton Rouge. They had the whole mishbucha there to watch the workout with Adam Peters and the coach Dan Quinn watching that. Louis Riddick was there to cover it for ESPN. And after it was over, he had a little conversation with Jayden Daniels.
Through this draft process, what has been like maybe one or two things that people have wanted to know about you the most? Like, what are the questions that you keep hearing people ask you about the most?
How much I weigh?
Well, I can just tell people now.
210 pounds.
There you go. And I can tell you this, look, people, looking at him up close and personal, which I got a chance to go like last year on the quarterback circuit and saw Bryce and saw CJ. I can tell you this, look, he's put together now. So everybody out there who's worried about his weight, don't worry about his weight. What works for Jayden Daniels? Like, what kind of structure works for you? What do you want out of an organization? Because I think it's important for you to interview them as much as they're interviewing you. So what do you want? What are you looking for?
I mean, organization is going to invest in me. Obviously, they're investing a lot of money in me, but on and off the field, as a person, as a man, that's something that LSU did here, Arizona State did. Coming at 18, they invested in me as a young man. Coming at LSU, they invested in me as a man. And show that I'm the guy. They're going to do everything in their power to make me successful. And then from there, it's just about me putting in the work. I bet on myself every time.
Jayden Daniels, 210 pounds, and you've heard the comparisons to Randall Cunningham. Randall Cunningham looked about the same body type and was pretty durable, had some injuries, had a pretty serious knee injury that knocked him out for the 91 season. That might have been a more competitive year for the Redskins, who kind of ran away with the Super Bowl that year, and Philadelphia with Cunningham might have given competition. But he played quite a while, and he was about that size, and you might say, well, things are different now in the NFL. No. Quarterbacks are more protected than they were when Cunningham played. So I don't think it's that big a deal, but I did hear Mike Tannenbaum, former GM of the Dolphins and the Jets, say that he was concerned about his weight, but he did weigh in at 210 pounds at the pro day yesterday, and they were all smiles. So we'll see if in fact the Commanders take him at number 2. Louis Riddick, after conducting a little interview there with Daniels, was on ESPN, and this was his analysis of what he saw in the workout.
When you see him up close and personal, you just see how powerful he is, but how smooth and fluid he is at the same time. Meaning this. When he wants to really drive the football, it comes out of his hand like a bullet. I mean, it's just absolutely just ripping through the air, and it gets there in a hurry. When he wants to put touch on it, he can make those touch throws. When he wants to throw outside the pocket in simulated out-of-structure throws, he can throw it with both touch or he can throw it with power. So, quite honestly, he has the full range, within his toolkit that he can go to. And I think his wide receivers also, with Malik and Brian, I mean, those guys are just fantastic athletes. And you could just tell that this is the highest quality college football that you could possibly get, both in terms of the way these guys conducted themselves, how they got along, and then how they performed out here on the football field. I mean, I I was giddy watching it. Like this is the elite of the elite here, and you can tell that these kids or these young men are the very best this country has to offer going into the pros, and that's pretty cool to watch.
So Riddick, who's a former front office executive, worked with the Redskins, played in the NFL for a number of years, has been, I think, an excellent analyst with ESPN. He gives Jayden Daniels the seal of approval on and off the field. And there are, I guess, some lingering doubts about Caleb Williams, who will most certainly seem certain to go to the Bears at number 1. And one of the concerns was about his dad, who had reportedly asked about possible ownership of the team. There was some question whether he's going to create a problem, and he wouldn't want to go to Chicago, might pull a Manning family move and get him out of there, all that stuff. So there was parental concerns, and we've seen that here with Dwayne Haskins and RG3. I think both of their careers were marred by influence from the dads. Well, Tom Libero's got a column today in the Times about Jayden Daniels' mom. Dad not mentioned, but there are, I don't know if they're concerns, but I think you have to investigate this a little bit. He writes, his mom's name is Regina Jackson, and she has a controversial track record of support for her talented son. Based on stories that came out of Arizona State, where Daniels first played before he transferred to LSU, Jackson, the mom, very much involved in her son's business dealings. At ASU, Jackson made news for her role in an NCAA investigation that would eventually end the circus-like tenure of former NFL safety and ESPN football analyst Herm Edwards. A February 2022 Athletic story reported that, according to sources, Jackson, the mom, was given uncommon access to the program, particularly early on. Some staffers in the past jokingly referred to her as a coach. The dynamic became an issue inside and outside the locker room. One former athletic department staff member said Jackson's presence around the football facility was unlike anything he had seen in his career. According to a June 2021 report from Yahoo Sports about Arizona State recruiting violations during the COVID era, prohibited in-person recruiting visits, screenshots of emails showed that Jackson allegedly helped book more than $1,100 in flights for recruits and adults accompanying them on a recruiting trip to Florida, according to documents sent to the NCAA Enforcement Department and Arizona State's Compliance Office. Jackson denied the allegations to Yahoo Sports. She was also not implicated in any wrongdoing. In the wake of the NCAA probe, offensive coordinator Zach Hill and defensive coordinator Antonio Pierce, who now is, of course, the coach of the Raiders, they resigned while receivers coach Prentice Gill and defensive backs Chris Hawkins were fired. Edwards was fired in September of 2022. Daniels entered the transfer portal in February of 2022. So he didn't come back for even that part of Herm's second year there, or what would have been his second year with Herm, and he went to LSU. And Tom goes on to write, after Daniels transferred to LSU, Jackson, according to ArizonaCentral.com, took some shots at ASU when she posted on social media, "We wish them well. We just had to let it go. They feel some type of way. I understand. I'm a businesswoman, and I understand. However, LSU probably gained a lot of Arizona State fans because they just wanted for him to fail, and it's okay. A quarterback has to have chemistry with the team," she posted. "You see the best quarterbacks. Tom Brady is not good without chemistry with his receivers." Ooh, that smacks of an RG3 comment. He's going to put the ball there, but if they're running the wrong routes and if they're doing stuff, what is he supposed to do, And the line we don't want to run, he's been behind a Pac-12 line that just collapsed, and they're good kids, great kids. We love them all, but he's not going to sit there and take 60 sacks, guys. She's divorced from the father Jay, who has also been a football advisor. I don't know. Is that a red flag? Is that something that could be a problem down the road? Yeah, I guess it could be. I mean, we saw the RG3 influence, and I just wonder, if he comes here, will there be some mom stuff that has to be dealt with in the way that RG3 sat with his father and they watched Kirk Cousins play against Cleveland, and they didn't run the pistol for Cousins, and they decided that Mike Shanahan was trying to sabotage RG3's career, get him hurt so he could play Kirk Cousins. And that's when RG3 came to the coaching staff and says, here's the plays we're not going to run anymore. And the coaching staff, well, this is the way we got here. We're going to have to run them if you're going to play. So he played, and he played basically on one leg last couple of games of the season, and then blew out his knee in the Seattle game, and that was pretty much the beginning of the end of his career. The Dwayne Haskins influence was in that his father, formed this company, Haskins and Haskins, right when he was drafted. And I don't know, how much of an influence it played in his career kind of collapsing here, but probably wasn't helpful. And it's just a beware that the mom might be an issue with Jayden Daniels, or might not be an issue at all, as apparently she was not with LSU because she wasn't given the access to the program that she was at Arizona State. All right, enough worries about that. Back to Ted Leonsis. Ted's happy now. He's got his new deal with the district. He was booted out of Virginia. Louise Lucas gets a big high five for what she did. And now he's got this $515 million coming from the city. And as he said yesterday in his news conference, it was the personal touch that he got from the District of Columbia, which ultimately drew him back home.
The mayor was sending over the police chief to see me all the time. What are your concerns? What can we do? How can we work together? What are the traffic patterns? Where does the crime occur? That personal touch really went a long way. And I only want to talk about DC. I don't want to talk today about, Virginia, but I will one day. We'll have a lot of fun. I've taken the high road, but we will talk about Virginia. But DC is home. And the mayor told me when I said we probably will be leaving, she said, no, you won't. She said, this is where you've been. You went to college here. You have blue and gray, which I wore. It's Georgetown colors, but it was really because Virginia's kind of two states. It's Richmond and Northern Virginia, and they need to get together. And sorry, I said I wasn't going to talk about Virginia.
He was holding up his blue and gray tie as he was talking about that. The reason I left that in is because I think it's instructive in the way this thing didn't work out for him. I think when he got together with Glenn Youngkin, the governor assured him that he could push this through. He could make this happen. And he didn't anticipate the kind of resistance that he would get, particularly from an 80-year-old woman, Louise Lucas, who he tried to schmooze at the last minute. And apparently she liked him, but she said, sorry, we're not going to do this. And it didn't happen. So I think that was the little shot there at the end was instructive, at least for me, because it tells me his feelings. And he can say all he wants about how great this is and how it worked out well for everybody and how business deals are sometimes tough, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But in reality, he wanted Virginia. He wanted that to happen, and it didn't happen. And he comes back, I think, with his tail between his legs to some degree, but he's painting it in a different light. He's also saying, well, the main reason that I waltzed with Virginia was they were going to give me all this space. They're going to give me 12 acres to build what I need to do, the practice facility, the Monumental Sports Studios, the whole Megillah. And now he's saying, oh, well, we just happened to come across some unexpected space right next to Capital One Arena.
I felt that we were really in a good partnership, as opposed to where I thought I would have a great partnership. Now, they did have one thing that we didn't have, and the mayor identified, and we talked about that. Land, space. We need space. This is a brand new space. It just opened. Thank you, Jose, for all your continuing help. And in major metro areas, you're in this arms race to build bigger and better and higher quality, and we've been running out of space. And again, working with the mayor and having a couple of drinks and saying, well, what could we do? Well, this mall next door closed. It, by the way, closed while we were halfway completing our esports center. And no one to talk to. And the city and a new landlord, we said, we could take a lot of that space. We could take this walkway here and connect it. We could now start to think about what could we do architecturally to make this area truly an entertainment community.
That is Gallery Place Mall, which I guess they're ready to take over there. This still has to be approved by the city council, but Phil Mendelson spoke yesterday at the news conference and is pretty much assured that they have the votes that this is all going to happen. But there's another part of this, and Ted went to great lengths to kind of smirk at the media yesterday when he said, hey, where was everybody? We were meeting in a hotel all the time. And then investigative reporters, where were you? Here, Muriel Bowser and I were in the lobby of a hotel having drinks, and nobody picked up on that. But there's an important question about that. All this negotiating that was going on with the mayor after he had this monster announcement in December that they were going to build at Potomac Yard, and that this was going to be good for everybody because, hey, the Mystics are going to play at Capital One Arena. We're going to have, I love women's basketball, he said. I'm a big fan of Virginia Tech women's hoop. So we're going to have women's basketball there, and we'll have some concerts. We're going to employ a bunch of people, and we're going to have all this great stuff in Virginia. So it's good for everybody. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, you made this deal with Virginia, and then what was happening with the district? Was this going on under Glenn Youngkin's nose, and did he not know about that? You'll get Ted's answer to that and more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
Mike Callow is in for Tony at 11 o'clock today. And don't forget, we got Orioles opening day as they take on the Angels. Coverage here at 2:30. And once again, we will be your home for Orioles baseball throughout the season. I talked to Mike Elias, the GM, yesterday, and if you missed that, you can find it at ESPN630DC.com, and I've also retweeted it at Andy Pollin1. Done a spectacular job. Major League Baseball Executive of the Year last year, and an absolute no-brainer on that. The team lost 110 games 2 years before, and they won 101 last year. And our favorite to win a very tough division, I mean, if the Yankees stay healthy with Juan Soto on the team, and Tampa comes back with another great year. Remember, they were about to run away with it last year, and the Orioles overtook them. So could be another fun season. Nats rebuilding, if they get into the 85 range of wins, would they perhaps stay in contention to get a wild card? We'll see, but they're probably a year away from really being a possible playoff team. Back to the business at hand, the business of Ted, the business of happiness, as he wrote in his book, and all the important things that you have to do in your life. I think we all got the result. At least I got the result that I wanted. Maybe you wanted the teams to be in Northern Virginia, but I think that it's great that they're going to stay in D.C. And if whatever happens in the end, it doesn't really matter how the process worked out. But let's recognize the process a little bit here, and let's recognize who Ted is. I don't think he should be celebrated as a hero for making this deal with the District of Columbia, and how he will be viewed as the years go by. This will be a part of his legacy. Candace Buckner wrote this paragraph in her column today. I think this captures it. Will he be remembered as the steadfast sports owner and applauded for remaining in the city, or will he forever be demonized as the suburban-minded CEO who tried to scheme and plot his way out of town? And remember, back in mid-December, this was Ted standing up in front of a big crowd in Northern Virginia and a smiling Governor Glenn Youngkin saying how this was not only going to be great for Northern Virginia, but this is going to be good for D.C. too. Remember this?
We own Capital One Arena. We also own the Washington Mystics. Women's sports is transcendent. I watch Virginia Tech women's basketball now all the time. They have a great team. My belief is that at Capital One Arena that we can host women's sports. We've invested $200 million in the last 10 years in keeping Capital One world-class as an arena. And our intention is to expand here and keep Capital One Arena in Washington, D.C. a great place. We'll host concerts there. We'll host concerts here. We'll have a 6,000-seat entertainment performance center here. And this community is so vibrant. You just have to look at other great cities. New York have arenas in Brooklyn and Long Island and Manhattan. They're all working. That's what our promise is here, that we can be an economic engine. We can employ all of the people who work at the arena in Washington, D.C. We can create new jobs, new tax base out here, and really work to make the promise of Virginia and what our governor spoke about, but also we have a responsibility to do a great job and continue to invest in Washington, D.C.
So it was going to be great for everybody, right, Ted? You know, D.C., we got the Mystics there. And I'm a big fan of Virginia Tech women's basketball. Really. I'm sure you could name 2 players on the team, maybe even 1. And so, you know, that was Ted in December. That was December Ted. And I think he thought that he would be celebrated for this. And I think he had assurances from the governor, this is going to get through. We're going to make this happen. This is going to be great for everybody. And he was surprised. He acted surprised anyway at the backlash and felt it necessary to produce some propaganda spots. So you just heard December Ted. This is February and March Ted, trying to sell this deal to the public that this is going to be really good.
And they're talking about a new school that's going to be built there. The governor is going to use this move as a way to make a big investment in Metro, which is needed. It'll just be a big improvement. We're going to be great neighbors, and we're going to be catalytic to positive change.
Catalytic for positive change. And those were some of the schmaltzy spots that he ran before Caps and Wizards games with the tickling piano keys, and he had his kid on it, and the CEO of the company telling everybody what a great deal it was, and it wasn't. At least it wasn't for the Senate in Virginia, which is Democrat-controlled, and Louise Lucas helped to chase it all away. So there's one lingering thing about this. And it's like Columbo. Remember Columbo? Just one more thing here. So he has this deal that he makes in December with the governor of Virginia. It's not a signed deal. It's a handshake deal. But the deal is that he's going to get $2 billion from the state of Virginia for this, and he's going to put up $400 million to build a new arena. And he's going to have all this infrastructure around him, and he's going to be able to have his studios for Monumental Sports and his practice court for the teams and, practice arena for the Capitals. Everything will be there, and he's going to be, running this Ted Town, this big city. In the meantime, we find out last night that there have been continuing negotiations with Mayor Bowser. He even made fun of the media for not finding out about these meetings that have been taking place where they shared drinks and ideas for hours and they got this thing done. So Tom Sherwood, longtime reporter with, I think he's with NPR now and had been for a long time with Channel 4, knows city politics in and out. And he asked this, I thought, very important question during the news conference last night of both Ted Leonsis and the mayor.
Did Virginia know that you were still meeting with the mayor while you were trying to get the Virginia deal done?
Can I just say something?
If you will answer my question, it'd be great.
Yes, I want to answer too, because no matter what, Monumental Sports is a D.C. company. So no one should expect that I'm going to stop talking to a D.C. company, regardless. So as long as they're a D.C. company now, and they're going to be a D.C. company at least till 2050.
Mayor, I understand.
Okay. I got it. Sure.
I understand your position, but Mr. Leonsis, did Governor Youngkin know you were carrying on this fairly public?
Yeah, actually, as I started my conversation, until 10 minutes ago, I had never signed a piece of paper.
I know that.
And so my agreement with the governor was, I will work with you. We'll work to do this. But if I'm sensing we're not the center of attention, I should be free to be able to talk to anybody. I don't have a contract. I don't have a deal. And he gave me permission, if you will. He said, yeah, your instincts are correct. And when you talk to him, he's a good man. And he said, yeah, she's your mayor. You're in town. Go for it.
Okay, so he says he got the blessing of Governor Glenn Youngkin to continue to talk to Mayor Bowser, but he didn't need it anyway because he didn't have a signed deal. Maybe that's all true. But it's just, again, it's a guy who seriously flirted with Virginia. I think really wanted it to happen. And he realized he had no alternative but to come back to D.C. Now, the Attorney General wrote a letter, I think it was last week, and Ted was saying, well, we can, if we pay off the bond, we can get out in 2027. That's what we're allowed to do according to the lease extension that we signed. The Attorney General, his name is Brian Schwab. He wrote in a letter last week that the city's position is, no. You can't leave until 2047. That's the way things are laid out here in this agreement. So if you're going to leave, then there's going to be a lawsuit here, and we're going to make sure that doesn't happen. Ted was asked about that yesterday, and he said, this is very Trumpish, oh, I don't even know who the Attorney General is. I've never met him. Okay. But, did that speed things up? He's saying no. He's saying that they had this deal in place and he was all happy with, what they were going to do. And the mayor had been so cooperative and they gave him, more police, which, to Ted's credit, they did need. I mean, that has become unfortunately a much higher crime area than it was some years ago. So that's a big part of that. So he's got some assurance on that. And, the fact that there were some concessions made. I don't think, and the mayor is not blameless in this either. Ted asked for $600 million for improvements to the arena and to the area, and was kind of ignored because Bowser has been courting the football team. She's made no mistake about that. She goes to the welcome home luncheon. We've got to get him back in D.C., and that would be great if that happened. So, Ted looked at this and he said, well, the hell with this. He also now had this deal in place. There was a payment that was going to be made of $500 million. They had that. And at the last minute, he saw that the deal had changed. And this was some reporting that was done in the Post a month ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, and that the deal had changed to the point where he was going to have to put up the money and the city was going to have to pay him back. So he was going to have to come up with the cash. And that's when he had this sweet deal with Virginia where they would get $2 billion from the state and he would put up $400 million to build the arena. And that's why it went down the path that it went to that big announcement in mid-December. Hey, we're going to Virginia, and it's going to happen in 2027, and it's going to be great for everybody. So I like the outcome here. I'm very happy with this. I hope I live past 2050. I don't know if I will, but if I do, I hope that I'm still watching the Wizards and the Caps play downtown in D.C. at that arena or an arena that's going to be built that's going to be bigger and better. But it's right on the metro. It's easy to get to. It's a great place to watch a game. Sure, there's improvements that have to be made. For God's sakes, it was built in 1997, and arenas just don't last that long anymore. But, I think this is the outcome that I want, and I think that most people in the area want. You don't want to fight the traffic getting out to Virginia and being right in that spot. I mean, this is where all the lines cross right there at Gallery Place or right next to Metro Center. If you want to walk a block or two, it's a great place to go. And the fact that the businesses are going to very much benefit from this. I mean, even before the announcement last night, Ted put out a tweet where he said that the teams had brought in 400,000 people to the city. And I responded, I said, whoa, you don't want to run away from home here? And then things ramped up in the afternoon to the point where we found out last night that there was going to be an announcement that Ted is staying. The teams are staying. They've got a deal, $515 million. Smiles all around. Smiles for everybody. Coming up, a very odd transfer portal move in college basketball. And how do you think Bill Belichick will do on TV? We'll get to that and more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
Mike Calla sitting in for Tony at 11 o'clock today. And we've got Orioles baseball this afternoon as the season kicks off, the 2024 season after a spectacular 2023 where they won 101 games, not swept in 84 consecutive series until they were swept by the Texas Rangers in the playoffs, but Rangers went on to win the World Series. So all in all, a spectacular year for them, and we'll see if they can keep it going this year. I just saw this, speaking of the Orioles, Cal Ripken's kid, Ryan Ripken, the little blonde kid who Cal comes over and kisses after he breaks Lou Gehrig's record, 1995, all grown up, had a career in baseball. He was with the Orioles for a while, was with the Nationals, never made it to the major leagues, and has retired from playing, but is doing a lot of broadcast stuff, including his own podcast. So he's fortunate to have some real good connections. And yesterday on his podcast, he had his dad, and he had David Rubenstein, who is the new owner of the Orioles. And these quotes are always fun to hang on to. And I believe that this will be the case, but this is a quote that came from the podcast yesterday from David Rubenstein. I'm not going to pick the baseball players. I'm not going to tell them who to trade and who not to trade. It's not my area of expertise. And I thought back to 51 years ago when George M. Steinbrenner bought the New York Yankees from CBS. He bought them for $10 million. Rubenstein paid $1.7 billion for the Orioles, but in 1973, George Steinbrenner paid $10 million for a franchise that had been sold to CBS for $13 million. I believe if you sold the Yankees today, you'd probably get $7 or $8, maybe even $10 billion for them. So, that proved to be a very wise investment. But Steinbrenner said, oh, no, I'm going to be with my shipbuilding company. I'm not going to be involved in the day-to-day operations of the baseball team. And, well, it didn't exactly play out like that. But baseball changed a lot, too. Free agency came along a few years later, and I don't think he could have imagined how he could change his team with the stroke of a pen like he did. Rubenstein is more familiar with the workings of baseball, and I believe he will stay out of the picture. But, down the road, if we see things happening, you never know. I talked to Mike Elias yesterday, and I did ask him about that. I said, that the payroll has gone up this year. There was like 66 million last year. They're like projected 97 million this year. And had he had any conversations with new ownership about strategy in spending? Elias has always protected the brand. He's always said, hey, when it comes time to spend, we'll spend. And now I think he will have the opportunity to spend more money, and whether or not he chooses to load up on free agents. I mean, he didn't say, because I kind of pressed him on this about the Oriole way. That's the way they used to do things prior to free agency. It was just all homegrown talent. They made an incredible trade for Frank Robinson with the Reds, and he was the backbone of those great teams that they had in the 60s and the early 70s. But by and large, these were homegrown players. They all came up through the system. The Brooks Robinson, Boog Powell, Jim Palmer, all the great players who came through. Even the manager, Earl Weaver, had come through the Orioles system. And he indicated that, no, you got to do a little spending on free agency. And also, when you get to the postseason, it's a different game, and you've got to have your roster ready, and that's why he said there's so much activity around the trade deadline, because teams have the ability to load up for the playoffs, and it's not just getting in. For some teams, it's getting in, but you also have to have that veteran pitching and some veteran leadership as you get into the playoffs. About the transfer portal in college basketball and the effects of COVID with guys getting an extra year. This one really surprises me. Now, we've heard this about coaches whose sons play on the team. The son either has to be the best player or the worst player. And in most cases, it's the worst player. It's the guy who was the walk-on and doesn't expect to play. The father doesn't feel any pressure to play him. In the case of like Creighton, where they had Doug McDermott a few years ago, he was the best player and the father was the coach, and there was no problem, giving him as many minutes as he wanted. That wasn't the deal, and also giving him the green light to shoot. There was no greater example of this than Pete Maravich playing for his father, Press Maravich, at LSU when he set the all-time scoring record, which was just recently broken by Caitlin Clark, playing 3 years at LSU when he averaged 44 points a game and never saw a shot he didn't like. There's that. But this one is really different. Patrick McCaffrey, who's the coach's son at Iowa, Fran McCaffrey's been the coach there for a while, and he's going to stay. They just made it to the NIT. And Patrick McCaffrey has been a significant player for Iowa. He's got another year of eligibility, and he's going to use it elsewhere. Now, maybe maybe they've gotten sick of each other. I don't know. But they just were eliminated in the NIT. They lost to Utah in the second round, 91-82. And Patrick McCaffrey, who I believe is dating Caitlin Clark, if I'm not mistaken. They both wear number 22, cute basketball couple. Anyway, in the loss that ended their season in the NIT, he had 19 points. Significant player. He scored over 1,000 points, 61 starts in his 5-year career. He has had the effects of cancer, which he's recovered from. He had thyroid cancer in 2014, and there's been some time where he's had to sit away from the team because of that. But a couple of years ago, he started all 32 of their games, averaged 10.5 points a game. A significant player on the roster. Last season, he had some problems with anxiety, had to get away from the team for a while, but came back and could have played another year with his dad. And he said in an Instagram post, I believe, he said, it's been a great ride, 5 years with him. He's an awesome teammate. Oh, this is what Fran McCaffrey said. Excuse me. Fran McCaffrey said about his son, great ride, 5 years, awesome teammate, awesome player, played really well, proud of him, told him I loved him. And you think about his journey and how his role has changed a few times within the program, just really proud of how he helped lead the team to what he meant to this program the last 5 years. So I don't quite understand what's going on here, why he would leave when he's had this relationship with his dad and has been a significant player on the team. A lot of times when a guy will leave after an extended period, it's because he's been on the bench. Like when Mike Krzyzewski retired, his grandson left, and he went to NYU. And he became a good player at NYU. That was probably his level. In this case, this is a significant Division I player who could play another year with his dad, has spent 5 years in the program with his dad, and maybe it's just like a marriage. It just kind of ran its course, and he's going to play someplace else. So that's an unusual one for me. Back to football. Mike Tannenbaum, a guest yesterday on the Dan Patrick Show, and said something, by the way, very significant, I thought, about Caleb Williams. He said, I don't know why the Bears aren't working on a contract with him now, because they can. They have the number 1 pick in the draft. They don't have to wait until the draft to do that. And he said, if I were the Bears at Pro Day, I would have put a playbook in his hands. And I said, start learning this because we're going to bring you in as soon as possible. But they're not doing that. And Dan said, well, maybe there's some influence from the NFL because it's such a big TV show now, the NFL draft, that they don't want to take away from the drama of the first pick, even though most people seem to think it's going to be Caleb Williams, number 1. Meantime, the Bill Belichick situation. He did not get a coaching job, which I think was a big surprise this past offseason. And it appears that he's going to go into television, but I don't hear any buzz about, what network he's going to go to. You're hearing that about Jason Kelce, who just retired from the Eagles as a player, and he may wind up at ESPN, but there hasn't been anything about Belichick. And so Mike Tannenbaum, the former GM of the Jets and also front office of the Dolphins, now working for ESPN, on yesterday with Dan. And he asked him how good of a television person did he think Belichick would be, given that Tannenbaum knows him pretty well, worked on his staff with the Jets, and has known him for many years in the NFL. And here's what Tannenbaum said.
Shockingly good, because it's amazing what he sees that we don't. and he has a tremendous sense of humor. I'm just telling you, like, he always defined the job, Dan, as like coaching his team. And he felt like his approach to the media was like, they're not going to, if we win, I'm going to stay. If we lose, I'm not going to be here. So the media is irrelevant. And he just never thought it was worth the time for him to show his personality. I think he would be outstanding, given his insight. And I'm telling you what, he's a lot funnier than you realize.
Well, it's interesting that it depends on your job title how funny you are. If you're a comedian and you say something, people automatically laugh. If you're the greatest football coach of all time and you say something and everybody laughs, because people might not laugh at Bill Belichick now because he doesn't have a job. But when he's the coach of the Patriots and you're winning Super Bowls, it's like everything he says is, oh, my God, it's side-splitting. And the number of people who told me, man, he's got a great sense of humor. All right. I've never seen it, never heard it. But you're saying he would be able to unleash that if he was going to be in TV.
Yeah, I'd say it a different way. You can't coach at the level he's coached at for 48 years not to be relatable to a whole disparate group of people, from owners to undrafted free agents to, equipment people to star. This guy's coached everybody under the sun. And I'm not just saying that's a sense of humor, but relatability, to be able to get your message across for almost 50 years, Dan. You really need to have people skills that, again, most people have never seen.
Well, what people have been talking about with this series, and I haven't seen it, it's about the Patriots dynasty, is that the way he coached the team, being kind of distant from the players, they don't know how that would work today. And as far as making the transition to TV, the all-time model is John Madden. John Madden coached the Raiders to a Super Bowl championship, had been their coach for 10 years, and decided he didn't want to coach anymore. Wasn't retiring to go into television, by the way. He didn't know what he was going to do next. He was a young man. He was 43, 44, and he thought he'd hang out more with his family. Well, his family had learned to live without him. His kids were older. They were in high school, maybe in college, and they didn't have time for him. His wife was working, so he decided, I got to do something. He started teaching at a local college, and then one thing led to another, and he got an opportunity to work in television and immediately fell in love with it. But he was in his 40s, and he became an enormous personality. As the business was changing, they didn't have the telestrator prior to Madden, and he made it work for him, and he just had this great personality, which everybody knew about as a coach. If, as Dan says, if Belichick has this great personality, we haven't seen it. I did okay. They brought him in on the NFL Network when they named the 100 greatest players of all time. And yes, he knows the history of the game. He knows football back and forth. He and his dad had a hobby of collecting books about football, and he donated an enormous collection to the library at the Naval Academy. He's very knowledgeable about football, always, all different ways of the game. He knows offense, he knows defense, he knows everything about football. But how you communicate that, and also he's in his 70s. Making a career transition then, we don't often see that. When and he was good when he did it. Dick Vermeil got burned out with his job with the Eagles. I think he was in his 40s. He did television for 11 or 12 years and was very good at it. But he's in the prime of his life, and then went back to coaching again and coached for quite a while. Coached two teams with both the Rams and the Chiefs. And so I don't know. I don't know how good Bill Belichick will be on television, but somebody's going to give him a shot at it, and he may find it's not for him. He may, just like Joe Montana, the greatest at that time, considered to be the greatest quarterback of all time, went to NBC, stayed there a year. Wasn't for him. He said he was at the Super Bowl, and he didn't want to be doing what he was doing there. So he left. Joe Gibbs did some television for a while. He was pretty good at it. I don't know if he was great, but he was pretty good. And he did it with Ditka, which made for kind of an interesting, contrast, fire and ice there. And then, others have tried. And some like Bill Cowher, who everybody thought, he's just going to take a couple of years away from coaching and work on CBS. And he's been a mainstay on their pre- and post-game shows for all that time. Whether he's going to get a chance to coach again is going to be interesting. I tend to think now, and I didn't think this when he left, but the way things played out in the offseason, I'm not so sure somebody's going to bring him in at the age of 72 after a year out of football and say, yeah, you're in charge of the team, but you can't decide who we're going to take. We're going to have a general manager here. It's not going to be all up to you. I'm not sure. You know what I would think about doing? I was even thinking about this. Not that Adam Peters is an excellent GM and probably will do a very good job here, but wouldn't you want to have him as a consultant and just maybe does he, I think he's split up with his longtime girlfriend. Does he want to get back to living in this area? He could conceivably live in Annapolis and work with the team as a consultant. He wouldn't have to go out to the park every day. Just to have him involved in his football knowledge might be something. And I don't know if there's any kind of a deal maybe in the works with the Commanders or any other team. But one thing that's been marked by the Josh Harris administration, which is not even a year old, I mean, they didn't take over until July, is he relies on a lot of other people for football insight and knowledge. He goes outside the box. So if Belichick, even if he's going to do TV, he could still do this, but wouldn't it be interesting to tap his brain and just, not necessarily have to listen to anything, let Peters make all the decisions, but to have somebody available with his knowledge and his experience, yeah, it might be something to look into. And as far as, what happens to him after that, whether he spends a year doing that and has the itch to coach again, we'll see. But as he gets further and further away from him, I tend to believe that we won't see him coach again. Yeah, he'd like to have the Shula record, but, you're not going to come back and go through three or four, miserable seasons trying to chase that. I don't think that's in the cards either. Mike Callow is in for Tony next. I will see you back here tomorrow morning at 9 a.m.